Happy New Year, gearheads. Welcome to your Sunday night with Speed City. This is John Massengale, and I'm in this studio in Austin, Texas. And I am joined by my friend Jonathan Green, who is he's on his way to New Zealand for the New Zealand the racing the Toyota Racing Series, actually. And I'm going to let you say the name of the Toyota Racing Series now, Jonathan, because it's a new name and everything. But how are you, buddy?
Good, man. I've got new Plymouth's volcano behind me. How about that? It's pretty cool, huh?
I like your
And
background.
that is a real volcano. Yeah, it's not real. I climbed it up this morning, but yeah, heading down New Zealand, getting ready for the championship, which is known as CT Frock, which is ridiculous because it stands for the Castrol Toyota Formula Regional Oceania Championship.
You better get that smooth
I'm just going to talk.
before you start talking on the microphone down there.
Yeah, but CT Frock sounds like you spilt something on a girl's dress. I no. I, I'm going with the Castrol Toyota Racing Series. Castrol are the main sponsor of the series, as it has been for many, many years. This is the 19th year of the series. We'll also be celebrating our 300th race during the 5 weeks of racing. And we've got a bumper field dominated by Americans.
That is fantastic. How many now? Was it like 7 Americans?
Yeah, well, 7 Americans and Canadians. And why I've included the Canadians is both Canadians raced in F4 and FR in the USA, and both are really good. Matt Clark and our current F4 champion, Woods Toth is his name. Got a great story, and he's had a great season. And so those are the 2 Canadians. And then we've got a host of 5 Americans of various different levels of experience, but some that may shine and some that have come to learn. And I can tell you why, if you're interested, as to why we suddenly have the most Americans we've ever had in the series.
Well, we'll get to the Toyota Series here in a minute, but I just want to talk about, first of all, I just want to say Happy New Year to everybody, because this is our first show of the new year. In fact, it's been several weeks since we've been live because we recorded our last show of the year and then we replayed it. So we have been slacking off, but actually I have not disconnected like this in a long time, Jonathan, and I know you are better at that than me, but man, I have really disconnected, and I am really excited about 2024 and all the things we're going to be doing this year. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We got some folks as usual jumping on YouTube, and there's probably some folks on Facebook. I'm not even over there right now, but yeah, Jonathan is going to be down at the New Zealand Series, Toyota Castrol Toyota Racing Series. But tonight we're going to talk a lot of Formula One. We're going to talk a little bit about the horrible news about Gil de Ferran, and we're going to talk Andretti F1. There's lots, I say lots. There's several little things to talk about there. And we're going to talk about the launch dates of the Formula One cars and lots more. In fact, Jonathan, I want to start with Gil de Ferran, because I know you. I don't know. Did you meet him ever?
Yes, many times. I met him both when he was driving, but also more recently as the head of McLaren Formula One with Zach Brown. If you remember, he was made managing director, or not. He was made team principal of McLaren with Zach as CEO. And he'd been working with McLaren in the USA and kind of did both jobs, if you will. Came and worked with Zach because they were in, 6s and 7s with the Honda, with Alonso. And it was at the bottom of, McLaren's terrible era of a few years ago. And so he was brought in by Zach, and I sat down with both he and Zach at Silverstone and talked about the future. And they were positive then, and I can now see that a lot of the work that Gil did back then has come to fruition. But the last time I saw him, sadly, was at the Indy 500. I got an exclusive interview with him for Sky Sports in the UK when Alonso was doing the Indy 500. And sadly, yeah, that's the last time I saw him, but gone way too early.
Yeah, way too early. And he passed away from a heart attack. And I think he was at a race circuit doing some, and I think may have been with his son, is what I've heard too. So that's a horrible. And he's only what, 56 years old.
Yeah, not good.
Yeah, yeah.
And a great driver and a really gentle. He's one of those gentle giants of motorsport. You know, he always had a nice word. You won't if you read up on Gil de Ferran and the tributes that have made to him, you won't hear a bad word about him. I mean, he was just one of those guys. And there's very few in motorsport. Most guys are pretty. You know, they're like entrepreneurs in many ways, which is they're very focused on what they're doing, and it's a very cutthroat business in that they haven't got time to be friendly because it is that kind of business. But Gilles was that kind of guy. You know, if you were to choose a table of motorsport people you want to have for dinner over red wine, Gilles would be one of them.
Well, I was listening to Marshall Pruitt did some interviews. I think he did some separate podcasts from several of the IndyCar drivers. And Scott Dixon, I believe it was Scott. It was one of the drivers, but it may have been Scott, but he brought up something really interesting. He said that he was very cerebral and he was really calm. And he said it was amazing that he was so calm at all these, at these events, right? That how could you be calm? You're about to get in a race car and go 200 and whatever miles an hour. And that he didn't really seem like he could be that competitive or aggressive. And then when he got behind the wheel and got wheel to wheel with him, he was like, oh my, this is a very lethal combination of intelligence and calmness and competitiveness. So he was, really, really well thought of by the other IndyCar drivers for sure.
Yeah, he reminds me in many ways of Scott Dixon and his calmness and Fernando Alonso. You know, you speak to Fernando outside of a car, and he's so interesting. And Ayrton Senna was the same. He's so interesting, so calm, so thought out in his reply. Like Ayrton, he could sit on a question that you would ask him for maybe 2 to 3 seconds, almost uncomfortably, and then would come up with the answer that you were looking for, or at least an answer that would perhaps surprise you. But he had time to think about it, and he was that kind of guy. And yeah, the kind of guy that you would want the Indy 500 because of the maelstrom that is, and he was able to just deal with that calmly. But boy, was he aggressive when he needed to be.
Mm. You said you were doing an interview for Sky. I know his popularity went all over the world, didn't it?
Yes, he was well known in the UK. I think he spent quite a lot of time in Europe as well. And like I said, the final time was with McLaren F1 with Zak Brown. And he was well known by the drivers. He was a friend to a lot of drivers and an advisor and a go-to guy. So he's one of those guys that everybody in the racing community will miss, not just his friends and not just the guys that raced against him. He's one of those guys that pervade the whole industry. And I think that's why it's so sad that he left us at 56.
Yeah, and it's funny.
And was a real shock, to be honest. I don't think anybody.
Yeah. Your audio was dropping out just a little, Jonathan. But I was just going to say, today I watched the 2003 Indy 500. Not all of it, of course. I watched a VHS version on YouTube. That's the one that he won, and I kind of got sucked into it. I probably watched probably 45 minutes of it, and he was. After the race, he was exactly as you're describing, he was excited to have won it. And he seemed like it was a huge relief, but you could tell the respect because the other drivers, were just, everybody seemed just as happy as he was for him. So it was really pretty amazing.
Yeah, no question. Sadly missed, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Well, I do want to move on and, a couple of comments on YouTube. We'll talk about those during the break, but Jonathan, I want to talk about a couple of the F1 launches that are coming up because we're starting to see the release dates, right? Let me look at the schedule here. There's 4 of them that have been released, and we've got one interesting one for the Williams team, but the ones that have been announced so far are Williams February 5th. And the new Stake F1 team, which I want to talk about that new name too. Also February 5th, and Aston Martin February 12th, and Ferrari the 13th. But what do you think about the Williams announcement that it's going to be in New York? Now, I don't know if we'll see the car then, but they're officially saying their announcement is going to be in New York, and they did something like that last year, didn't they?
Yes, they did an event in New York, but they didn't actually launch the car. And in fact, modern launches these days are not what they used to be, where you struggle to get the car ready and then you launch it. Now you have a visceral idea of what the car is, while the actual car is being prepared back at base. So it's both interesting in that you won't see the new car. And by the way, there's another reason for that, and that's you don't want everybody to see all your plans to make a change and go, oh, we didn't think of that. And so there's a little bit of espionage at the launches. But also, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, and anybody on the internet can tell me, but I think this is the first ever actual Formula One launch in America.
Ah, yeah. I have not Googled that, but I'm sure somebody will let us know if that's the case. Yeah,
official launch.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to see what this looks like. And if you go to the Williams website right now, they just talk about, stay tuned. We're going to give you more details and you can sign up for all that. But yeah, that'll be interesting to see exactly what they do. But all right, Johnny Green, let's get our quick first break in. And when we come back, though, I want to talk a little bit in depth about the Sauber F1 team and the name and the sponsorship and all that. You're listening to your Sunday Night with Speed City, back after a quick break. All right, we're still live on YouTube, Facebook. Let me look at the boys that are out there, boys and girls. Thank you, Paul.
I've opened up my video again. Do you see me?
Yeah. Let's see. Let's check your video. Yeah, looks okay. Looks okay. You just dropped out for a minute.
I just moved it. If I drop out again, I'll turn it off.
Yep, sounds good. Let's see. The boys are out there. David Lawrence. Good evening, gang. Happy New Year, everyone. Same to you, David. Kevin Kelly, welcome back, guys. Paul Bryan, just guys. There's a leggy blonde watching who's taking umbrage to that. Paul Bryan, I've been thinking about you lately because I've been watching the electric car industry collapse a bit with the higher interest rates and the softening economy. Been thinking about you. I know you were saying that this was all moving faster than you thought it would. But Kevin Kelly says, yeehaw, Paul. Talking to him. Mike Bowles is there as usual. Yeah, Joe, I think that was Dixon. All right, we're coming back, guys. Told you, quick break.
Hi, this is Karun Chandok, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, when we went to break, I said we're going to talk about the Stake F1, the Sauber team. I do want to do that, but I want to remind everybody we are going to talk about Andretti. There's some really interesting things that that popped up a little bit. We'll talk about them, the Andretti F1 effort. So stay tuned for that. But the Stake team, the Sauber team, will now be known as the Stake F1 Kick Sauber team. That's going to be the official name. I'm sure us and everybody else are going to be calling him Stake or Sauber or one of the two, but Jonathan, I want to ask you, do you think that this is a gamble, what they're doing? And let me clarify that. And then, yes, that is a pun, because I've been studying a little bit about the Stake, the company, the Stake company, and Kick. And what they are, they're really the same company, because Stake is a crypto online gaming website. And Kick is a platform like Twitch or even like YouTube, but it's there because a lot of the platforms like Twitch don't allow certain types of streamers, like crypto or gambling is probably what the case is. And so they started their own. Stake did. And Stake, this online gambling website, we've talked, Jonathan, about all the sponsors that have come into Formula One, and a lot of them being tech companies. And I kind of throw Stake in there because if they're doing crypto and they're doing online gambling, I guess they're sort of a tech company. But it kind of feels like one of those sponsors that, and I know they were sponsoring the team last year, but now that Alfa Romeo dropped out, they're the title sponsor. But it kind of feels like one of the, I don't know, tobacco almost you know, sponsors that you wouldn't really want in a perfect world, let's say. And, you know, online gaming and online gambling, I should say, is you know, they may even run into trouble because there's some countries that don't even allow you to advertise that. So I don't know. What do you think about this sponsorship? And I don't know how much you even know about it.
Well, you're right. I mean, there's a risk involved, but it is really a 2-year risk because they're going to be a different team in 2 years. So, they might be in some ways taking a bit of a gamble, as you say, on the fact that they can use this loophole. And I don't think it's a loophole, but use the Formula One vessel, this very exciting car, to promote something that is kind of hard to promote. Like you said, you just mentioned that some countries may not even accept the advertising, and they can work around that. Tobacco companies did it for years. Marlboro had to take the sponsorship off, and, you know, Minnow, etc. Philip Morris is still, whether you like it or not, involved in Formula One because they kind of foot the bill. For the Ferrari team. And, you know, a lot of people don't know that are new to Formula One because they don't think about it that way. But the truth is that's how they're involved. And they've come up with a different name. You know, BAT Tobacco, British American Tobacco were involved in Formula One for a long time. And they too had to go under the logo, certainly in rally, of 555. So there's been ways around things that aren't the obvious sponsors. But I also think that this is also the future, that you'll see teams become. I mean, I hate to say it, but we've already been there. Red Bull is a drink. It's nothing to do, like Alfa Romeo, with a car. And yet we're fully accepting of the Red Bull Oracle Formula One team. And yet all of us know it. It's a drink that that is hugely popular, but it's not necessarily something that you rush to in the supermarket, because at the end of the day, it's not the most healthy of drinks. Sorry, Max. But you know what I mean? So, but what I'm getting at is I think we'll see more of that. And it wouldn't surprise me that in the future that we could get the Dell or the Cisco Formula One team, or the, you could drop Red Bull and it could be the Oracle Formula One team. In other words, big tech, I think, will have a big role to play in the future because they are the money, or the new tobacco, as we've often said. So I think this is kind of the start of a different way of looking at Formula One sponsorship.
Well, I was thinking of it when I thought about this. It kind of reminded me of the disastrous sponsors that the Haas F1 team had,
Yeah.
So because, you just don't know. I mean, I don't know, first of all, crypto has had some incredible swings in that industry, right? Where the value of the coins or the cryptocurrencies go wildly vary, right? They go up and down, and, the industry contracts and expands, and it's just volatile is the word I'm looking for. And I worried about that. And I was looking into the owners of Stake and Kick, and I was like, I don't know who these guys are. And one of them is 28 years old. And I was thinking, I don't know, could this all fall apart? But I just thought it was interesting. And you're right. It's a 2-year stopgap until Audi comes in and changes the name. And look, we have to remember that I was talking to a new Drive to Survive fan, right? Talking about the Sauber team, and they were like, well, have they been around? I said, yeah, they've been around, but they're not a huge team. They're not a Mercedes. They're not a Ferrari. I said, really the closest to comparison is probably the Haas team to compare them. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. And in fact, Peter Sauber, who was the founder of Sauber Racing, is perhaps better known for his time with Mercedes in sports cars. So they kind of have always reluctantly been the Sauber Formula One team, and so they I say reluctantly, but it never took on as a powerhouse, the name Sauber, as a racing team. And like you say, when they began in racing, when Syntec and Sauber were going at the back of the field racing against each other. They were the Haas of the day, if you will. They were the small team from Switzerland. And then they got, associated with the bigger team. And so they've survived. And it's actually a great survival story because they've always been a relatively smaller team. Now, Haas has survived because of its
well, I would say I'll finish that sentence for you until we get you back, but I would say it's
with
survived.
Audi really breaks them out.
Yeah, we lost you for a second there, Jonathan. But I was just saying, first of all, that the Haas Automation Company is a multi-billion-dollar worldwide company. So, I think that's a big part of that. But look, Jonathan, I think that this is an interesting take for 2 years, and let's just see what happens. But I thought it was funny because of the way that the industry they're in, the volatile industry. But I want to move on and talk about a couple other things. And I was looking at the other launch dates, and Aston Martin, February 12th, and Ferrari, February 13th. And I don't see, that's the last of the other two, both on February 5th, February 12th and 13th for Aston Martin and Ferrari. It made me think about Aston Martin, Jonathan. What do you think about their incredible start last year? I know they had a waning end of the season, but what's your expectation for Aston Martin next year? I say next year, this year.
Yeah, I think it's high. I actually think that the combination of Alonso and Stroll is good. I know Stroll didn't have a great season comparatively. Alonso's back to his best and moving the team forward as a great two-time world champion should. They've got the new factory, and remember, they moved into it in May, in the middle of the season, which is an outrage in some ways, and kind of almost ridiculous if you're trying to continue that pace. And I think that's why they suffered in the second half of the season, because they were still sort of fixing doors and, you can't work into a new facility with 600 people plus and expect it all just to work like the old one did. So, there's bound to be some teething problems. So I expect them now to have settled into their shoes, settled into their factory, and will build on what they achieved last year, which, when you think about it, is pretty incredible for a team that used to be Jordan back in the day.
Yeah, really, last year that was one of the biggest stories of the whole year for sure. So, and I just wondered if I don't see any reason. I'm with you. I don't see any reason why they can't continue to do well. I don't know. It will be interesting to see of the teams that were in that battle for, best of the rest, however you want to look at it. Because you've got Mercedes, you've got Aston Martin, you've got Ferrari and McLaren. If you had to choose of those, how would you either rank those? What your prediction, or who do you think's going to do well? You don't have to rank them, but how would you look at those four, Jonathan?
Well, the way I look at it is slightly differently. I would look at the fact that Mercedes factory team, Toto Wolff and the boys, needs to be fighting for the championship, and therefore they need the help of Aston Martin to do that. So I think there will be good crossover. I think there will be, at the sharp end, trying to push that engine to be the best it can. And they've had an incredible, Mercedes have had an incredible 10 years. So, Aston Martin should be, gaining from that. And of course, they're moving over to Honda. So eventually, in the future. So I really do think that if Mercedes factory team is going to be up there, then they also need Aston Martin to be there too. Yeah,
good point. I like that. And I think that, as usual, you're, you do need some help like that. So I'll take that, Jonathan. What about I had some stories in here that I wanted to ask you about. I wanted to say the Williams team, we talked about them coming to New York, but what about Logan Sargent in his sophomore year? What are your expectations for him?
Surprisingly high, actually, because he's dodged a bullet that everybody knew was coming at him. And that is, you get one chance in Formula One, you get a year, and not if you're Nick de Vries, maybe, but you get a chance, and if it doesn't work out, they're on to the next shiny thing. And that sounds a bit harsh, but it's the reality. There are some, and it's great being here in New Zealand because, I know the amount of juniors and academy drivers chomping at the bit to get into Formula One. And so if you're not cutting it at the sharp end in a Formula One seat, there are a myriad of drivers already to take that seat. And so, the Williams team, have got a great academy. Aston Martin have got a great academy. We all know about the Red Bull and the Ferrari one. So, I think that in that respect, there's always somebody ready to take the seat. But Logan has now got over that hump, and I actually think we're going to see the best of him because he now knows he's got the support of the team. And if that's the case, then we might see the best of him. And if you look at his results in Formula 2 and how he raced in Formula 2, and when you talk to him, we were talking about Gil de Ferran, he definitely has all the attributes of a good Formula 1 racing driver. Cool, calm, collected, but determined.
All right, well, let's get a quick break in. When we come back, I do want to talk about what you're going to be up to next, Jonathan, the Formula Regional Oceania Championship down in New Zealand. So we'll talk about that next and Andretti later in the show. You're listening to Sunday Night with Speed City, back after a quick break. All right, we're still live on YouTube. David Lawrence wants to know, how are you guys feeling about the F2 field this season? Jonathan, what do you think about that? Did I lose you, Goonie? I think maybe Jonathan stepped away. Oh. Hey, Green.
I'm back.
Oh, there you are. David Lawrence was
Yes.
he was on YouTube asking about how you feel about the F2 field this season.
Okay.
So hold on just a second here. So anyway, you can go ahead and answer that, Jonathan, if you want.
Oh, what, on YouTube? Honestly, I haven't really spent a lot of time looking at the field in terms of, who, what, where, and when. But I think it's going to be a very competitive field because you've got people like Antonelli, Zach O'Sullivan. We've got, Oliver Bierman, who we saw at Abu Dhabi. There's some really good new names and a combination of like the Enzo Fittipaldis and the Jack Crawford, for example. Korea's going to be there, Enzo Fittipaldi, and then guys that we're more familiar with, like Isaac Hadjar. There's some really good names, but the one that sticks out is Antonelli. Everybody's been waiting for him to break out. I mean, he's already broken out from karting because he was a world phenom back then. So it'll be interesting to see how the new kids come in against the establishment.
Yeah, and I was thinking Fittipaldi Enzo has looked so good, hadn't he? He was coming on strong towards the end of the year. And just the fact that Korea's
another
even
name
in a car.
is Paul Aaron. Paul Aaron is another one, like Antonelli, who's been in the wings and everybody's been talking about him for a few years. And then another guy that hasn't had as much sort of notoriety is Richard Verschoor, another Dutchman. And he won the Toyota Series a few years ago.
All right, here we go.
Hello to everyone. This is Gunther Steiner. This is Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, we're going to talk about the Formula Regional Oceania Championship because this has been known forever as the Toyota Racing Series, but it has joined the FIA Formula Regionals, which like we have here in the United States and like they have all over the world, and it's a big deal. They got super license points a couple of years ago in the Toyota Racing Series, but this takes it to another level, doesn't it, Jonathan? And you're going to be the voice of that all for the entire series, aren't you?
Yes, I am. And this will be my 12th year of doing it. And it's been, for me, if you want to sound, if you want to puff your chest out and say you're in the know, doing junior series, especially this one, really gives you a head start. I mean, I met Lando when he was 15. I met Lance Stroll before anybody had ever heard of his story. I remember stupidly asking Lance Stroll if he ever driven a Ferrari. And he said, yeah, my dad has a collection and we own a track. I mean, Well, but I didn't know who he was, and so, but that was because this is the beauty of junior series, especially at the FR F3 level, is that it's a breakout time. And from the 6 weeks ahead of us here in New Zealand, somebody from this pack, and it's really strong this year, is going to break out, and you're going to be going, hey, what's the latest with so-and-so? And I'm going to be saying, well, he's done this, he's done that, and he's now in F2. So, you just on YouTube, you just got somebody asking me about Antonelli or asking me about the field. Well, Richard Verschoor got his breakout year here in the Toyota Racing Series. And, of course, the last two that stand out, Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda. So if you might have heard of those two, they were both in the championship together.
Well, a good point is that the first time I ever heard Lando Norris's name, I believe, was Toyota, right?
Yep.
When you were down there.
Yes.
Yeah, first time I heard his name.
Then he'd already, yeah, that's right. He'd already won the F4 British Championship. But if you're sitting in America, why would you be, why would you presume that Lando was going to be the next phenom? But then suddenly put him in an international series of guys coming from all over the world in a big team, and suddenly it was a breakout year.
Well, let's talk about the North American drivers. There's a bunch of Americans and a couple of Canadians, I hear. So which ones of those are you got your eyes on, Jonathan?
The two ones that stand out are both the Canadians, to be honest. And that's Patrick Woods-Toth, who's our current F4 champion with Kiwi Motorsports. So he's staying with the team that took him to the championship in the States. And Matt Clark, who also raced in that championship, but is now on the road to Indy, but also had a very successful time in the FIA, FR, and F4 series in America. So those two guys are, and Scott Goodyear, as you know, commentates with me, the Canadian IndyCar driver, former IndyCar driver, and he's had his eye on these two for a long time and has been pushing them to make it. And so I'm definitely going to keep an eye out for them. But then you've got a host of young Americans that have been racing either in America or around the world. And the one that stands out, to me anyway, is, where is his name? I'm just looking down the list of them. Well, let me name who they are. First of all, Landon Matriano Lim has just signed for Giles Motorsport. There is Titus Sherlock, who's been racing for Kiwi Motorsport, and he will be racing again. He was on the podium on and off throughout that. Then there's Jet Bowling from Texas, and in fact, Sherlock's from Texas, from Prosper, Texas. So we've got two Texans right up there.
Nice.
Jake Bonilla, another. So we've got three Texans. Jake Bonilla from San Antonio, Texas.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, we've got some really good names, but all of them are what I call in England wet behind the ears. They're still on the way up, and I expect them to learn hard, which is what the team manager Gary Orton wants them to come here for, and then go back to America and do what Ryan Sheehan did. Ryan Sheehan, sadly, I don't think is going to make it, or at least he's not been announced yet. He was trying to get the money together, but I don't think he's going to do it. He's going to concentrate on doing another season of FR, or may move on. But if you remember, Ryan came here from Austin, Texas last year and was, top 10, got a podium, but really didn't shine, but then got runner-up to the runner-up of the Toyota Racing Series, Callum Hedge, who's now obviously in Indy Lights next year.
Yeah,
but the one
regional,
exactly. The one I want to...
I was just going to say, just on Ryan Sheehan, that could be a strategic decision too. You have to decide where you're going to spend your money as you're coming up, and they're not a stroll, right? we know them pretty well, and they have to make their decisions, and it may be just as much strategic as it is financial to not do that one again. They've already done it, and so it's already on his resume. So yeah.
The other one that I haven't mentioned yet and is Bryce Aaron. Now, you remember Jeremy Shaw, our good friend from WEC? And you know that he takes young Americans over to the Formula Ford Festival. Well, Bryce Aaron did really well at the Formula Ford Festival, and he's going to be, we're going to get on to Andretti, he's going to be in Andretti's Formula Next team this season. So Michael Andretti will be tuning in to see how M2 Competition's USA driver Bryce Aaron will get on.
Yeah, awesome. Well, this is a big deal because, first of all, it's a Formula Regional, so it's an FIA, points, super license points gathering series in the Formula 3
18
level.
points for the winner.
Yeah, I mean, what is it? 44 points for an F1 super license, something like that?
Yeah,
So
40 points.
40?
And the
Okay.
point is, if you win the Toyota Racing Series and come back after February, let's say February 20th, then you've got 18 points under your belt. And then you have a successful FR season somewhere else, or move on to the FIA F3. You're knocking on the door, which is what Lawson did. You're knocking on the door of F1 because you will be up at 35, 40 points. And then you just need a test drive or whatever, and you're there.
Yeah. So that's a big deal. And so the summary of that is you get basically an entire season in what, 5 weeks?
Yep. 3,500 kilometers, 15 races, 3 at each venue.
And it starts towards the end of January, right?
Correct. It stops the 18th, 17th, 18th, and the 19th of January is the first round on the North Island of New Zealand at Taupo.
Yep. So if you are listening and you need your open wheel fix, and you can have it in January, and is it going to be on YouTube, Jonathan?
Yep, it'll be live on YouTube. We're hoping to get it on as a post show on MAV TV as well. And as you know, MAV TV is effectively the new home for all things motorsport in America. And with 7 entries from the USA, that is total domination. There's obviously several Kiwi drivers and several Australian, and we've actually got a South Korean and Italian and so on and so forth. But there's no question that the field is dominated by North American drivers.
Okay, well, I want to move on and talk about Andretti because I've been promising that, and it is one of my favorites, if not my favorite topics to talk about. And, of course, the big news is the story that really, if you want to check it out online, of course, is Chris Medland's story on Racer.com. But the bottom line is that Renault has announced that they are ready to resume Andretti talks if the F1 entry is granted. And, yes, that's a great headline, but there's some interesting little tidbits if you drill down into this. I was going to reach out to Chris, but I thought, you know what? I'm not going to bother Chris. I know that he's still basically enjoying his time off. So, but I just thought there were some interesting points, and a couple of them that you pointed out, Jonathan, how the line in this story, it says, Andretti's on the grid in 2025 means it would have to abide by the FIA financial regulations from this week onward. I thought that was a fascinating little sentence in that story.
Yeah. And, what does that mean? Does that mean they have to work? It really is kind of but Medland knows what he's doing, and he wouldn't have put that in. And also for that, it's also a compliance thing, which means that if you don't comply within the week or, from that moment on, then it could hamper your hopes of getting in by 25. We know that GM aren't coming in till much later. So
as a engine manufacturer, as a power unit, right?
As an engine OEM, as a supplier to Andretti Global, and only Andretti Global to start with. So that story of Renault is still in talks because the original deal that Renault had has now run out. But Andretti, quite rightly, wants to come into the championship earlier before before two things happen. One, the rules change in 26, and two, GM coming in 28. So they need an engine partner, one, and they need to be compliant in every way for not just the FIA, but FOM or Formula One to grant them a chance to be on the grid in 25. So it's still up in the air, but I see positive rather than negative in that story.
Yeah, I do too. And the other thing that was in that story, another good sentence that I pulled out of there, it says, the anti-dilution fee could be revisited as part of a new Concord agreement discussions first. And I mean, this is really probably the biggest sticking point in my mind with the Andretti entry right now. I think we've talked about this a lot, but I think that's probably the biggest sticking point because I think everybody, if you ask them, would say, this seems like a no-brainer on the surface, right? You've got the Andretti name and the Andretti Racing organization behind it, and then you've got Cadillac's name and now their commitment to be a power unit supplier. So it just seems like a no-brainer, but the sticking point is, of course, the money, right? Is the other 10 teams saying, we don't want to divide this pie up. So, what would you do, Jonathan? Or would you say to them, you know, let's say because right now the number is 200 million, if I'm not mistaken. Would you say to Andretti, okay, if you want to come in now, we'll let you in, but you're going to have to pay a bigger fee? Could they even do that with the Concord agreement, or do we have to? Because if they wait to 2026, then there's going to be a new Concord agreement, and clearly the number will not be 200 million. Who knows what it'll be? 5, 600 million, or if not more.
Well, I think those numbers have already gone up for Andretti's entry to be viable to the teams. And so the figure of 600 million was already being bandied around. But I think Michael's being a smart businessman as he is, because 25 would make him, Ocean's 11, i.e. he'd be part of the gang going into 26 for the new Concord agreement. But if he doesn't get in by then, the new Concord agreement could give the opportunity for him to join them under new circumstances of dilution of whatever they decide, because it's kind of like you kind of wipe the slate clean with a new Concord agreement and all the teams agree. So if you're going to have a new team, that's the obvious time. But Michael's trying to get in earlier so that he's part of the gang.
Yeah. And I saw your buddy Keith Collentine, who runs racefans.net. He put up a really interesting poll, and his poll said, the question was, should Andretti be allowed to join the Formula One grid? A simple question, right? And 97% of the people polled said either slightly or strongly agree that the team should be granted a place on the grid. I mean, that I have not seen. I just chose that because it's, we've been saying all along, it feels like it, and everybody that calls into the show or on YouTube or whatever has said, yes, clearly we want Andretti, but 97%. Does that surprise you? I mean, because that's global, because they're not based in the United States, they're based in the UK. Does that surprise you?
No, but it just shows that the fans know their history. They know the achievements that Andretti has taken. And if I were to be flippant, I would say, what if 20 years ago Google were offered this thing called an iPhone and they were wondering whether they should buy into it or not, because it seemed a bit kind of like superistic and futuristic, and what kind of profits could they make out of that, do you think? And I think that's how stupid this all is of course Andretti are going to succeed. They're already successful. They've got one of the biggest motor racing teams. I mean, there's no bigger motor racing team in America than Penske and Andretti. Obviously Chip Ganassi, but that's still a smaller operation compared to Andretti and Penske. So it's almost kind of not stupid, but it's not. It doesn't make any. And then add GM and Cadillac to the pack to that.
Yeah.
Situation, and then it's really a no-brainer in my point.
Well, I just think it's time. I think we've talked about this long enough. Everybody knows the obvious things, right? So let's figure out what the next step is. And I don't know what this means. And of course, we'll talk to Chris Medlin and sooner than later, if not for sure by the start of the F1 season. But I want to talk about a couple other ones that I saw in this poll, Jonathan, because they were pretty good. There was one that talked about Logan Sargent. And the answer was, who should and should not keep their seats. And, the poll came out, and Lance Stroll was the first. He was, the readers, 28% felt he should have been replaced, and Logan Sargent was second after that. I mean, that's obvious, considering where he finished in the points. I just thought it was funny. But if you guys don't go to racefans.net, go check it out, because it's pretty cool, and I think that poll's on their homepage. So, all right, well, let's get our last break in, Jonathan, and when we come back, we have some more Formula One and lots more to talk about. Back after a quick break. All right, Greeny, we're still live on YouTube. Let me check out the comments there. David Lawrence says, I think they upped it to 600 million. I don't think there's anything official that I've seen yet.
No, but he's right. That was the figure that was bandied around. That 200 million went out the window.
Yeah, clearly that's not going to be the answer. Let's see. Anybody else?
I mean, it was officially 250 to be on the to throw the dice, which Dicker and High Tech and a few other companies did or said they would, but then only Andretti got through.
Yeah. Hey, we're talking about Alfa Romeo earlier while we're in a break. I did find out that it was estimated they spent, this was Blackbrook Motorsports, $140 million sponsorship with stake to do what they did. And that was including last year. So I think the plan all along was to do this. I don't think we got told this, but anyway, $140 million. I was looking at how many dollars. And all right, we're coming back.
Hi, this is Max Verstappen, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, welcome back to Speed City, your Sunday night with Speed City. Jonathan, I had to let you know that your Dallas Cowboys are the second seed in the NFC. Pretty cool, huh?
How about them Cowboys? That's so good. I knew we'd beat Washington, but I was worried that that New York playing Philadelphia twice might hamper us, but nope.
Yeah, not a problem there. I had to get you that update because I know you're halfway around the world. All right, so the next story I want to talk about in Formula One was, I thought this was an interesting story because they're talking about the cars and the engines. And this story says F1's engine future will be driven by road relevance, which they've always said that about Formula One, right? And I just thought it was interesting, Jonathan, and I don't know how much, you don't follow the road cars like I do, but they're saying road relevance, right? So if Paul Bryan is still listening, he's going to immediately agree with me is that we don't really know what this future looks like. Because if you'd ask everybody 8 months, a year ago, what's happening with road cars, they're saying the pedal to the metal, pun intended, is going to be all electric, all electric, all electric. But if you look at what's happened to the electric car market, here in the United States for sure, and I guess globally probably as well, I mean, I wouldn't use the words the bottom has fallen out, but it is dramatically slowed. My father-in-law was going to buy a Mustang Mach-E, and he couldn't buy one because there was none on the lots, and they were asking ridiculous amounts. And so he moved on and didn't buy one. Now, Ford is actually giving incentives on the Mach-E's, and they have months and months of supply. It is a staggering turnaround. And so I don't know how quickly this is going to happen. You know, there's the federal government talking about incentives to move to electric vehicles. And so that is in place. And so that's going to keep the momentum to some degree. But the people are not voting with their dollars. Number one, because, money was so cheap. You could get car loans for what, 2%. And that's unincentivized car loans for 2% a year or two ago. And now car loans are 6, 7, 8, 9% loans. And so electric cars have the disadvantage of they still are more expensive. The average new car is like $48,000 or something right now. And the average electric car is like $60,000. So F1's engine future driven by road relevance, what exactly does that mean right now? And I think, and I've always said this, I thought electric is great if you have the right lifestyle. And until the infrastructure, there's the Tesla supercharger infrastructure has been now opened up to other manufacturers, but with but the range that everybody worries about, range anxiety, is still a very, very real thing. And so hybrids have been popular, like the Prius on up, right? So I just don't know what they're saying is going to be the difference in F1's future, because I don't think it's going to be all electric as soon as, some people are saying, oh, we can, some of these manufacturers claiming they'll be all electric by 2030. And I'm not sure that that's going to happen, number one, and how this could affect Formula One. But the other thing that could be affected is something that's happening down at the Toyota series down where you are, and that is carbon neutral fuels. Because the low carbon, I'm not going to say carbon free, but it's a fossil fuel free fuel that they're going to be using in your series. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, first FIA series to do it.
Yep.
And to answer your question of how Formula One is going to be, not road driven, but trying
relevant.
To stay in step. Huh?
Relevant.
Yeah. Try to stay in step with the future of the road car, and that's really important because if you like, it is the marketing tool that makes Formula One viable in one way. It's an exciting sport. It's great. It's adrenaline junk. It's adrenaline full. All the rest of it. But when you look at what Formula One, as I call it, the test tube for the auto industry, the relevance is that what trickles down from Formula One and hybrid, you just mentioned it, was around 10 years ago in Formula One, as we all know. And now you get your hybrid Honda and off you go. But all of that technology was developed in Formula One and is still part of Formula One. Harvesting, regeneration, and so on and so forth. And go further than back, drum brakes versus disc brakes, et cetera, et cetera. So all the innovations that are essential to make Formula One as unique and technically brilliant as it is, finally end up on your road car. And that's where it's road relevance. So things are different now. One is fuel. Others will be tire technology. Yes, you mentioned the different uses of electric, and that will continue. But I think fuel is a big one. Fuel is definitely a big one because I think we're going to end up with hydrogen in motor racing, and it's already starting to happen in sports cars. And I think that's going to end up in the road cars of the future. And while there will be a role for electric cars, it may be that the service industry is where electric cars are king, because a bit like diesel, they'll have their own stations and their own things. But I think motor racing will be the trailblazer and the test ground, the test tube, as I say, for the future of the auto industry. And when you look at Audi, GM, Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari, these are the engines.
Yeah.
And these are the auto manufacturers driving Formula One. So they have to be road relevant.
Yeah, and Kevin Kelly brought up something. He brought up a name, Porsche, and he said they stated this week that they'll be making 6-cylinders all the way through 2026. But Kevin, I think you need to take another look at that, because they said that they have announced, by the way, Jonathan, that they are going to be having a hybrid version of the Porsche 911, the Icon, the flat six. The 911 is defined by a flat six in the back of the car. That is the 911. And they're talking about adding the hybrid version is going to be an electric motor to the front, exactly like the Corvette did. In fact, it's very similar to the Corvette in the fact that it is not a plug-in. There is no way to add electricity to it with an outlet. The only way you're going to be able to add electricity is with the either regenerative braking or with the engine, just like the hybrid Corvette, which is the same way. But they also talked about that an all-electric 911, that has been on their roadmap. They've moved that out. And I think, in fact, maybe as the mid-2030s. So I don't think we're going to see an all-electric 911 anytime soon. And we are going to see a hybrid. They've already announced it. In fact, it may be, I didn't look at it super careful, but it may be as soon as like 2026 or 7 that they're going to release the hybrid. So it's coming very quickly. And in my opinion, that is a fantastic way to make a performance car, is have the internal combustion engine and the range you get with that, of course, but you get the sound and the soul that we love, but you add the instant torque and all of those things like that electric adds to it. So it's a fantastic combination. And I mean, look, we've already seen that with the LaFerrari and the Porsche 918 and all those, but I just thought this was a fascinating discussion. I was like, where does Formula One go? And it's not clear right now, right? It's murkier than it ever has been, probably in its history.
True. And that's why they use that term road relevant, because wherever the auto industry wants to go, their development, their research and development departments mean that Formula One will have to go that way, because otherwise they're just spending money twice to develop road cars and to develop racing cars. So it will be in tune.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. A couple people on YouTube says, many European countries are backing down. It's going to be very fascinating to see how this plays out, because the biggest thing that's happened in the market is that the cheap money has dried up, and of course the economy has softened too. So people are having to watch their dollars a little bit. And it's like, okay, before you could get a cheap loan and get you a Tesla Model 3 or whatever, but it's a very different world. Well, we are almost out of time, but Jonathan, I want to tell everybody what's going on this year. We are going to be doing the same as we have done last year. We're going to have Chris Medlin back. We'll have Bob Varsha back and Dave O'Neill when he can. So we're going to be doing all the same thing that we did last year. And we're working on a really fun project, if we can get it pulled off, and we'll keep you guys in the loop on that. I had a conversation with the F1 this past week and with COTA, so we'll try to keep you guys in the loop on that. But otherwise, until then, we are going to be doing your Sunday night with Speed City, and I'm going to try to get Bob Varsha to join in when Jonathan's too busy down there doing the Toyota series. So, but we are out of time. But thanks, everybody. We appreciate you tuning in. And Jonathan, we will we'll get you back on next week if we can. And we'll thanks everybody, and we'll talk to you next Sunday night.